Hello, I'm Stephen Berry, and welcome to the Executive Business Network, where we bring you leading business experts who'll help you solve the challenges confronting your business today. Joining me in the studio, I'm happy to welcome Lloyd Filer. Hello, Lloyd.
Stephen, how are you?
I'm good. Now, you're an expert in industrial relations. You run your own consulting company, and you've been around the industrial relations landscape for many, many years. Tell us about your background.
Well, look, I've been working in human resources for many years, probably the last 25 years actually. Spent a fair bit of time involved in industrial relations, right from the very start in the late 80s when negotiations and the process of enterprise bargaining came into play in the Australian businesses. So I've had that opportunity to be involved in a wide range of industrial agreements over that time, probably about nearly 100, I think.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Yeah, and you talk about enterprise bargaining there. That's obviously a very topical term and fairly thorny and vexed issue for many people. So what are we going to cover in the film today? Well,
I think one of the things we need to talk about is the fact that when you're renegotiating enterprise bargaining agreements, it's important to understand who you're negotiating with. Certainly you are negotiating with a union, but the reality is it's your employees that you really need to gather up. It's your employees you need to communicate effectively with.
Okay, well that's great. That's set the scene for what's to come. We've certainly got a lot of useful information to get through. So thanks, Lloyd. Let's make a start and we'll see you in the next topic. Lloyd, when it comes to enterprise bargaining, are there any common themes that have emerged in your experience?
Yeah, certainly, Stephen. One of the critical issues I think is important. It's important for managers to understand, or businesses to understand, who they're actually negotiating with. One of the key issues here is really making sure that you understand that you're negotiating with your employees, and they are in most cases using a union as a representative. So there are a lot of occasions when managers will find themselves perhaps intimidated by that. The fact that there is a union involved. There's no necessity to be intimidated by that. It's important to understand that you can have certainly have a reasonable relationship, a very good relationship with the union, as well as the one you have with your employees. And the important thing is to understand that communication with your employees is the thing to work on.
Is that part of the challenge, though, that the fact that there is a union involved, can that compromise some of the relations that the management might have effectively with its employees?
Well, look, I'm a firm believer if you start with the relationship with your employees, then the relationship with the union can certainly be a much more professional one, and one that can help both the employees and the business. The union is there to represent its members, and understandably they are keen to ensure that all of their members get the opportunity to get what they are looking for within that negotiation. Clearly, when unions have the opportunity to be able to deliver a negotiated outcome for a business with their members, they do find that there are occasions when management will push back. They're going to push back. I mean, unions will ask for things that perhaps aren't available. So the really important thing about that relationship with your employees, as they're asking the union to negotiate on their behalf, if they're doing that, is that you need to make sure that your employees understand exactly what is going on in your business and the reasons for you taking a particular line in negotiations.
What about management? How important is it for management to be transparent throughout the bargaining process?
Yeah, look, I'm a firm believer in transparency right throughout this process. I think it's important for there to be no hidden agendas. If you want to develop a sense of trust with your employees, then you ought to be doing that with the union as well. So importantly, I think it's a process of communicating effectively with your employees about what the actual financial state of the business is. So employees can look at that and they can understand why you're sitting in a meeting at a negotiating table asking for a particular issue to be addressed in a particular way. That might be flexibility, it might be a lack of an ability to pay a large wage increase. So there are many issues that need to be covered off in that process. Sure.
How important is it to encompass the legal input throughout the process? Should they be involved every step of the way?
Well, importantly, I think if at the end of the day you have a legal document, this is a document that's going to be registered and it's going to be approved by Fair Work Australia in that process. So it's important to understand the legalities that sit behind it. Industrial relations legislation has changed quite significantly over the last few years, and there are going to be probably some more changes in that process as we go through the next few years. Importantly, they require somebody with a legal background, I think at the end of the day, to be able to review that agreement and make sure that you have not fallen into a trap of agreeing to something that perhaps is not legal in the legal sense of the Act, and to ensure that you're able to deliver what both parties want out of this agreement.
Now, Lloyd, if I had to ask you for one single piece of advice through your experience around creating successful enterprise bargaining agreements, what would that be?
Communicate. Communicate, communicate, communicate. I think that's the most important thing about negotiation. It's really about making sure that everyone in your business understands exactly why you are taking the position you're taking. If an employee understands that there are some significant issues in the business, you're being affected by a high Australian dollar, being affected by imported product that's coming into your market at a cheaper price, and those sorts of things are important for an employee to understand, because at the end of the day you're trying to manage a business with all of those external pressures at the same time, both nationally and internationally. So.
How important would you say that industry-based considerations are in the process?
There are occasions when unions, in fact, will take a view that there may need to be an industry-based arrangement that sits within or as part of an enterprise bargaining agreement. Now, critically, I think it's important that you understand as a manager that this is an enterprise agreement, and those things are important for all employees to understand, because your business is a separate business. It is an enterprise agreement for your business to deliver the outcomes in your business, not something that is an industry-based arrangement. There certainly are some industry-based factors that impact on that, and some of them may be in your benefit to take up. But the reality is you're talking about your own single enterprise bargaining agreement for the benefit of you and your employees to go forward with.
Right. So you've talked about a number of themes: communication, transparency, having a clear agenda. Are these the key outputs you'd be looking for?
It's pretty simple stuff, really. I mean, it can get quite tricky. There's no doubt about that. And you've got to be focused, and you've got to be planned, and you've got to be prepared for that process. But that's pretty well where we are at the moment.
Perhaps we could spend a few moments talking about business strategy. How important is it to align your business strategy to the outcomes you're looking to achieve in the enterprise bargaining process?
Yeah, look, most businesses, in fact all good businesses, will have strategy in place. They will have business strategy in place which perhaps could go out 3 or 4 years. Most enterprise agreements can be 2 or 3 years, depending on what you're trying to do. So the important thing is to understand that if you're going to develop an enterprise agreement and it has flexibilities and other opportunities within the framework of that agreement, it's important to understand that they are aligned with your business strategy. Importantly, this is not just about how much and when, it's about what the business can gain in terms of flexibility and the arrangements in place to be able to deliver on its strategic imperatives.
So it would be the case that there's no one size that fits all businesses?
No, again, I think it's important to understand that this is about your business. So your strategy will be about your business. The movement you make at the negotiation table will be dependent on how firm you are about meeting the strategic objectives of perhaps more than half of your business, because you're talking about a large number of employees in some cases.
Lloyd, you've been involved with many enterprise bargaining processes throughout your career. Can you say that one size fits all, or should we be looking at a tailored approach for different organisations and perhaps different industries?
Yeah, look, I have seen and in the early days been involved in a number of agreements where the outcome was more around the money. The outcome was about, how many percent, how much would be paid and over what period.
Yep.
The difficulty with that is that at the end of that agreement, if you don't take the opportunity to go back and review what you did, you will, and if you did do that, you would find that there were occasions when you've paid money for flexibility or for arrangements which have never delivered. They've never been delivered in the business. And the important thing is to understand that without having those goals in place, without having that goal-setting process in place, it's going to be very difficult for a negotiation process to take place. It also is very important to understand that while these agreements can be 2 or 3 years, they are not just 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 6 months of negotiation at the end of the 3-year or 2-year agreement. They're really about an entire process, a continuous process of consultation with employees and with the unions about exactly what you're trying to implement. those goals that were set at the beginning of the process when you set the enterprise agreement up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually, should business leaders spend time engaging with their employees before they go through the bargaining process? So effectively setting the scene before you actually go into the room and start negotiating?
Well, my view is that you should always be talking to all parties. The first thing you need to know about any enterprise bargaining agreement process is you need to know who you're negotiating with. You need to know the key employees, the shop stewards. You need to know key influencers in your business. You need to have the strategy around the business detailed. You also need to know the key union officials, the organisers, the local people in the union that are an important part of this process. Because it might get to the point where you may need to discuss the negotiation process through that committee with any of those parties, and I think it's really important to ensure that you've got a working relationship with all of them and to know them, to have a relationship through the entire period, not just the few weeks before the agreement closes out.
Many of the things you've talked about today have been best case scenario or a little bit idealistic perhaps to some people. What's your experience of these kind of outcomes? Are they achievable?
Look, I think it is. I think it's evident that managers in any business become quite concerned when the negotiation comes up for an enterprise agreement. And the reality of that is that they're probably doing that because they're looking at what is history out there. They're looking at industrial disputation. They're looking at the way previous negotiations have been handled. And I think, as I said before, the communication process is the one that will really be the key to better outcomes, making sure that you can get a better outcome. Because if it goes pear-shaped, it goes seriously pear-shaped. And that can impact on the business's profits, your employees, all of the things that are important to a well-managed business.
Yeah, so the risk is much greater than just the EBA that's been negotiated.
It is,
much
indeed,
broader.
it certainly is. It can be a quite dramatic place. You've also got the reputation of your business at stake here. Your brand is at stake. There have been some significant industrial disputations in this country, and in a lot of cases, it has been about the brand that is being impacted as much as anything else. Good management would understand that they need the strategy in place to be able to deliver better outcomes, but they've got to be able to communicate more effectively with employees to be able to do that.